Has your upbringing influenced how you parent? Do you find yourself repeating the good and the bad lessons that your parents, grandparents, or guardians instilled in you? We will talk about that and much more. Stay tuned to the Brothers in Fatherhood podcast. Welcome to Brothers in Fatherhood, the show that is by Black fathers for Black fathers. I'm Apollo, one of your hosts. I know what you're thinking. Another Black father podcast. However, this podcast is slightly different than other Black father podcasts. We aren't doctors in the field of clinical or child psychology. We aren't celebrities or ex-professional athletes or professional journalists. We aren't qualified to provide expert opinions. The only qualification that we have is that we have children, thus making us fathers. Whether through adoption, marriage, or biological conception, we wear the dad title as a badge of honor. We want to be the best version of ourselves that we can possibly be. That's why we formed this group of fellow dads, a brotherhood of sorts of Black fathers, coming together to share our stories and experience in order to help one another grow, develop, and refine our parenting skills. Let's be honest. No one knows what they're doing when they first become a father. I know I didn't. In today's world of social media, global communications, and advancing technologies, the world has become interconnected and information is at our fingertips. We are faced with vastly different worlds than that of our parents. This constantly ever-changing environment brings new and emerging problems that we will face. So how do you face them? No amount of reading or studying can prepare you for the uncertainties of being a father. It's all about on-the-job training. So why not merge our efforts and learn from one another to figure it all out? That's why we designed our podcast to have plenty of rotating hosts and guests to provide different views and perspectives on Black fathers as well as sons. This allows us to discuss the topics from several different angles with fathers of different backgrounds that you, the listeners, may identify with. We aim to challenge one another, even have friendly debates from time to time, but ultimately the intent is for us to grow this platform for the culture so we can share our experiences and knowledge to develop the future generation, our children. Each episode will tackle a specific subject that we have encountered as fathers and discuss questions that our kids might have asked us. Nothing is off limits. Topics such as explain racism, encouragement of college versus working straight out of high school, social norms, sex and dating, and much, much more. For our very first episode today, we're talking about how our personal upbringing has influenced how we parent. Do you find yourself repeating the good and the bad lessons that your parents, grandparents, or guardians instilled in you? Before we jump into the topic, some introductions are in order. First, I want to introduce my fellow co-host, Joe. He's a father of 4, 2 boys and 2 girls, ages 10, 9, 7, and 5, with 1 boy on the way, due date June 8th. Next, I want to introduce Mike. He's a current father of 2, a daughter 9, and a son 7. Last but not least, I want to welcome Alfred. He's a father-to-be. His wife and he are awaiting their first baby boy, with a due date of May 22nd. Welcome to Brothers in Fatherhood, gentlemen. Let's go ahead and start the conversation. Joe.
To be honest with you, I don't raise my kids the way I was raised. Totally different time now. My oldest son was born in 2009. So you got to keep in mind that came after a real estate crash. So times were completely different than when I came up in 82. I try to instill the morals and the values that I think every particular kid should be instilled with. Respecting your elders and those particular type of morals and values. And when I looked at how I'm actually raising my kids and bringing my kids, it's completely different because the times has changed.
Times have changed. So the environment has changed from how our parents raised us, right? So you can point out many different things that change the landscape of parenting and what it means to be a father in today's day and age. So yeah, the biggest thing that sticks out to me is technology. Cell phones, now they're almost essential to everybody's day-to-day life, correct? So I remember in college getting one of those little Nokia little bricks, and as a freshman in college, those were, the things that kind of replaced pagers. If you remember pagers, and you would take your pager, right. You got a page, you go to a cell phone or try to get some to a landline. Those things are almost obsolete. I can't even remember the last time I seen a payphone, and a pager, let alone. But now you have literally technology at your fingertips. You can conjure up anything that you want to know about any subject and in a couple different clicks, right? So how does that overall dynamic, that technology change your parenting? So that changed the environment. Therefore, it changed how we have to parent within the environment. So our parents didn't have to deal with those certain aspects like technology. It just wasn't there to this level yet. You know what I mean? So how does that change the environment so much where you have to completely look at things differently?
So, technology, just because I teach some stuff about technology, right, and what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I'm constantly reminding the young people, the young military service members, that I didn't grow up with the internet, right? The difference is they had it their whole lives. They don't even know, most people don't even know what the Dewey Decimal System is, right? They don't know how to go to the library and check out a book and, sit there and read it. That's all. Hey, you go to the library today. When we was growing up, that's what we did, right? My mom would just, hey, we're going to the library. So for me, it changes. I had to look at allowing my kids' screen time to be limited, right? Because I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, but I do believe that they put out certain types of signals at a young age to make kids more dependent upon technology, right? You see so many advertisements come across the screen in order to change what they see, change how they view, change the things they want, make them more dependent upon, just, I don't have a tablet. I don't have a phone. I don't have the internet. I don't have the TV. So what am I supposed to do? I make my kids go outside. You got to spend an hour. You got to spend 45 minutes outside. I don't care. I mean, if it's hot, of course, come in, get some water, but take your butt back outside. I kind of try to instill some of the things that I had to do as a kid without, completely taking away technology altogether, because it is vital. It is great to have it, at our fingertips. And then, as they grow, because I have an 8-year-old, being able to tell her, hey, you use the internet, you use technology to your benefit. You're willing to look up things for, pop music or the latest and greatest dance move or, whatever, TikTok or whatever is out there. But when you need some real information, make sure you use that knowledge, to your advantage, or be able to use that to an extent. So, that's just me. I try to definitely limit it without taking it completely away, because I don't want them to be so caught up in it, if that makes sense.
I think so. For me, from my perspective, I think technology has changed the environment so much that it is quickly leaps and bounds surpassing my ability to keep up with it. So, for instance, my youngest one had taught me something just yesterday about this website or this particular app that I had no idea, had no clue it even existed or the capability actually existed out there yet. And without without going into the particulars, it was just this 9-year-old is sitting there showing me how to do these things, this new, latest and greatest, whatever it was, fad at the time, through this technology application on his smartphone that I couldn't even fathom doing at that particular age. You know what I mean? So I think because they're exposed to so much more than what we were exposed to at that age, it's a trade-off. Certain things are going to fall between the cracks. Like you said, they don't even know certain basic things that we were brought up to know during our generation. You know what I mean? So there's a trade-off. Yes, they may have a lot more information at their disposal. However, certain nuances are going to fall between the cracks. And how do you, as a parent, make sure that you instill those qualities and you make sure certain things don't fall between the cracks?
Definitely.
So not only does, to Joe's point, does the environment change from when our parents had to bring us up, that changed the dynamics of how we have to parent as adults, but other things have changed from that time, from when we were little. right? So not only did the environment and technology change, but what else changed? Can anybody
Well, yeah,
think of any?
let me add on that. You know, when it comes to the environment change, a lot of things change. Let's be first and foremost, but let me give you an example of what I mean by this. I grew up in a public school system, and pretty much everyone out here listening can say if you went to a public school, at some point you either knew a bully or you probably was hanging around with one of the two. It's automatic at every school, no matter what. There weren't enough teachers and aides out there to actually find all of those bullies out there and actually, discipline those. So you either had one in your crew or you were one yourself. This is the 80s and the 90s, though. And you dealt with that a different way in those particular decades, to where you either manned up yourself and you became a tougher kid, or you pretty much just got bullied the whole time and you just kind of lived with it, to where at some point when you got in high school, you ended up getting on a wrestling team and figured out a way to, protect yourself. This was 80s and 90s. Now let's take a bully into 2010s and current 2020s. That's not happening. You're getting expelled. You're so isolated now to where people are actually stepping up to actually help the person who's being bullied, versus actually being on the side of the person that's actually doing the bullying themselves. This is the public school system. My kids, they don't go to a public school, but they were in a public school. So when I actually had them in a public school, and one of my actually second was being bullied, in my mind, I'm like, well, damn, how do I deal with this? Because I'm going to go right back to how I was when I was a kid. And my first instinct was, I'm going to go talk to the parent. If the parent got out of hand, me and that parent was going to fight, period.
Same here.
But I had to step back and be like, this is 2019. This is 2020. It was actually like in 2016. It was 5 or 6 years ago. But I'm like, damn, what position is this going to put me in as a father if I do this? Possibly jail time, loss of job, completely just screwed my entire family up by doing something that I probably would be able to get away with in the later 90s and 2000s, or in the 80s when our parents were doing that. That's what I saw. If you wanted to deal with something, you saw your parent go out and handle something if you were getting in trouble at school or anything like that. You can't, to an extent, you can't do that as much anymore, depending on the community that you live in. And depending on the community that you live in, you have to be very, very careful how you actually do that going forward. So what I'm doing now, I'm actually having my kids talk themselves out of situations that I was unable to talk myself out of when I was a kid, that actually resulted to a fight. So I wasn't a bully when I was a kid, but I actually didn't take a lot of crap because that's what my dad and my mom taught me. You're not going to come back home and be the victim, basically, like that. You better either go back out or I'm whooping your butt. It was one of those particular things. I don't do that. And I'm not saying that was a bad way of teaching me, because it taught me a lot, but it also, times have changed now. So it's like, I wish I can tell my kids, look, if someone pushes you, push them back. But honestly, my kids are in a school that is 98% white. They do that, I'm talking to the principal. Why? Because not only is their skin color, it's 2% black. So anything they do is going to be something. So the last thing I'm trying to teach them is be like, no, you don't push that person back. Hit this person if you have to. I'm actually trying to teach them what some of the other kids will be doing. Like, try to talk your way out of that. But then if you have to resort to anything physical, explain that before you actually do this. And what I mean by that real quick is, look, I don't want to hurt you, but you're actually invading my space. If you come closer, I'm going to take this as a threat. And if I take this as a threat, I'm going to punch you. I'm going to hit you. I'm going to get you out of my space. But I've already warned you 2 or 3 times. At that point, if they tell me, Dad, I did this and I said exactly what you said, they still came, they're not going to be in trouble. They're not going to be in trouble from me. And then I can actually go in and articulate that to the principal why this incident ended up happening. So that's what I mean when it's saying that the environment has changed. There's a completely way that you have to deal with everything in this day and age. People are sensitive. You got tweets and all this stuff that goes out. People are recording you now. We didn't have that in the 80s and 90s. You got into a fight. That was it. That was history. It was in your mind. You wouldn't told your friends how you got into a fight. Now you get into a fight, it's all over YouTube.
I agree that time has changed, but they are being bullied a different way, right?
That's true.
Cyberbullying, right? So I'm gonna talk about you on Facebook or now what they use now, Instagram or Snapchat. I'm gonna do whatever I have to do that way, right? So we also have to protect our kids in that manner and say, hey, you know, back in our day, you bro, put it on the internet, come say it to my face, right? Like I bet you can say all you want on the internet, but you won't come up to me. So
but
I
that
think it
makes a
is a
great
little
point,
different.
Mike. So
Yeah.
how do you teach your children, like, hey, instilling those things like what was instilled in me? If you have a problem with me, you come approach me, talk to me man to man. Don't put anything online where there's something that you can say to my face. Don't smile in my face to write something behind my back online where you have that space and opportunity. You know what I mean? In person.
Sure.
How do you instill that kind of hit on what Joe's saying and hit on what you're saying? How do you teach your kids that this hiding behind a keyboard thing, where you can easily approach somebody in real life and in the flesh and say what's on your mind and get it off your chest?
So I think it's about their character from what you instill in as a character, what they see us do. Like, so how me and my wife approach things, or I can go up to her and say, so, hey, look, I'm upset about, the way you did such and such, instead of, finger text, I'm going to talk to you via text, right? We in the same house. I know you're upset with me. Don't send me a text all the time. Maybe say, hey, come upstairs so we can talk. But just the little things that they see how we approach, right? I can remember my father, whenever he was upset, I watched him talk to my mom, able to do that, right? And a lot of the issues these days is that our kids don't know how to communicate because of the internet, because of, having technology at their fingers. I just send you a text, Mom. No, I know I'm in the same room. I know it's easy, but you're not going to text me in my own house. We show them what's acceptable, right? The social norms that we allow in our homes, the social norms. Hey, that's your friend. Don't waste time texting them. Go talk to them. They're sitting right there. You know what I mean? Like, and then, with them being able to have phones in school nowadays, it's a little tough because I can't talk to you, but I can shoot you a quick message because we don't vibrate. So now I can shoot you this finger message or an emoji. You already know what I'm talking about. So just having that building a close enough relationship as a young person when they're before, like, so my oldest is not even 9 yet. She'll be 9 in June. So as long as I build that relationship with her in these early ages, then I can instill some things and say, hey, when you're upset, come talk to me. When you're upset with a person, you should really go talk to that person, especially if you hold them in high esteem, if they're your friend or if they've offended you. And there's a way to go about saying it with some kind of tact, with, using your words. And I think for us, early on, when they're upset and they want to cry, nothing wrong with crying. Crying's a great emotion, but use your words. Explain to me what it is that's going on. So making them talk early on, I think that's one way that we go about doing it.
All right. So we have another brother over here, Alfred. I want to go ahead and get you jumped into this conversation. So Alfred, for those that don't know, he is expecting his first child coming up here in May. It was May 23rd?
Yep.
All right. So he is a father to be. I definitely want to get his take on a lot of the stuff that we're saying, because he has in his mind how he believes he's going to play these things out when it comes to parenting his son to be. Alfred, understanding how you grew up and that family dynamic and where you sat as far as sibling, because you have brothers and sisters, correct? How did that form you as a person? And then how did you as a person become an adult, and how do you envision your parenting will be influenced by your upbringing?
I think birth order, I should say, definitely plays a part in your upbringing. Because typically, in a lot of households, the youngest is the one that's considered, quote unquote, the spoiled one, because they're the baby, they're the cutest, etc. Where you have the oldest is kind of the one everybody has to emulate, or that's their standard. And you got the ones below that, they fall in between that rebellious stage, or just kind of in between both of those layers. But I think
where'd you sit?
I was the fourth oldest child. I was the second
what?
oldest boy, though.
All right. How many was there?
When I was growing up, it was 5 of us. Then 13 years later, after the youngest was 13, which is my younger brother right below me, then another one came along. But by then, majority of us was pretty much out of the house. So the youngest currently, he basically grew up by himself. So when I was growing up, it was 5 of us in the household at the same time, 3 boys and 2 girls. And with that being said, I think that we live in now and how things have changed. So I think it's going to be just kind of a mesh of things, almost kind of like, just a rolling kind of start for me to where I'm going to implement some of those things that I was used to growing up, as well as I'm always be ever, adapting to, what society has changed and grown to be.
So you made a good point. So as the environment change, you have already recognized that there's certain things that your parents did in your own upbringing that won't be applicable today and won't have the same
Absolutely.
impact. So therefore, there's really no need to try to use those tools from your parents' toolkit to try to apply that same message to your son. So it's good to recognize that, hey, you can't apply everything that was done to us to our children, because it's just not, everything's just not going to fit. It's not going to take hold. These children are exposed to a totally different environment. So you have to see what works. And parenting is what? It's all OJT, right? It's all on the job training. You kind of see what sticks and what doesn't. You hope you don't scar them for life as you're doing it, but you're trying to figure everything out on the fly, right? You're trying to build it in flight. So go ahead.
I want to just touch on something you just said right now, Paulo, scarring for life. I don't think parents, like let's say our parents, know what scarred us for life. A lot of times we don't even like to have that conversation with our parents. Like, when you treated me this way when I was 15, that actually set with me. You know what I mean? And me personally, I've never had that conversation with any of my parents, but there was a lot of things that I would like get mad about, let's say when I had kids, and I actually behaved like my mom and my dad when I told myself I'm not going to be that way. You know what I mean? And there was a few things. There's a lot of things that I didn't like in particular, not necessarily in a bad way, but my dad wasn't around in my house when my dad was around. But then when you go back to his upbringing, his mom and his dad was around. So it kind of like it actually in my mind, like, well, hold on. You were raised by your mom and your dad in the same household, so why are you choosing not to be in your kid's life? And that was me and my sister. My dad only had 2 kids, but when I try to have that conversation with him, it was more like I don't need to explain anything to you in that kind of way, to where when I grew up, I was just like, you know what, this is a check right here. I don't want to be this way. I actually want to communicate with my kids. So if I tell my kids to do something, I need to make sure I'm explaining why so that they understand it. Just like Mike said, I make my kids go out for at least an hour or 2 a day on the weekends before they play any of the games. But I also give them things to actually do while they're outside, because we're not close to a park. If it's a game that I buy, because we all know there's no Toys R Us store anymore. Half the shit at Target is outdated, and it's just a toy that you're going to see in the trash can a week later. So we're all buying electronics now. But if you take that away and say, you know what, I'm actually buying my son a softball and a baseball bat. Well, if he's the only child, or if he's like the oldest by at least 4 or 5 years, and you live in a community where it's not many people, well, guess what? You're going to have to be his friend. You're going to have to go out and actually show him how to actually play softball or football, baseball, or whatever. And if you're not willing to do that, then you might as well tell him to stay in the house and actually play that game, because he's going to actually be more enthused on playing the game, feeling like he's playing with someone else, than going outside playing baseball alone. So it's the communication, to me, as we continue to grow and change is inevitable. It's always going to be change. The communication between your kids has to be strong. You have to grow that bond with your kids, because it will scar them. and you're not even going to know it until they actually, one day they may just tick. You know, I told myself, you know, one day I'm going to just get pissed off and I'm going to just call one of them and be like, you did this when I was between 10 and 15. And I still ain't forgot about that. But I'm old enough now to just be like, you know what? I'm over it, but it does scar you. And sometimes even though you say you're over it, you're not. You just kind of put it in the back of your mind. So the scarring is big because you don't really think about it until someone else brings it to your attention. Be like, damn, you know what? That did get to me. And I still think about this when my parents did this. It could be something small, but that doesn't mean it didn't scar you.
Yeah. So I was reading this article before this episode, and there was a statement that this doctor made, and I'm not going to remember it verbatim, but he basically said, so there's wounds that you have when you're growing up in your childhood, and that kind of shapes how you are today. You go a 180 and change that behavior of what you observe from your parents, and do the total opposite. So if one of your parents was an alcoholic, for instance, if one of your parents was an alcoholic, if you do a total 180, you would never or very seldom ever drink alcohol or repeat that behavior because you saw it growing up and you interpret it as a negative impact in your life. So you want to be the total opposite. Then they said also it can have the reverse effect. You can, see a parent, essentially be an alcoholic, and then you want to replicate that same type of behavior. So you become an alcoholic. Right. So depending on the individual person, they can perceive what their parents are doing as either acceptable activity or unacceptable activity, and choose to either, take on that same type of behavior or do a total reverse of that type of behaviors. For me, I know, my upbringing, I was the third boy, but grew up with four of us, and, all the attention was kind of put on my older brother. So I just kind of it allowed me to do my own thing. I was not the mama's boy, not the daddy's boy. I was just the kind of like the middle child syndrome, which they're kind of known to be the clueless, kind of left to their own devices. So I just made my own mind and said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I never really got any pushback. That allowed me the freedom to kind of shape myself as my own person. I saw my dad was into certain things. My mom was into certain things. I took a little bit of this. I took a little bit of that because they didn't corner me as one of their favorites, so to speak, as their child and try to form me. It happened with my older brother. My dad tried to form him to be a mini him. It happened with my little sister, which was the baby. My mom tried to, shape her a certain type of way. But when it came to me specifically, I kind of went out and did my own thing. I think that lasted into my adulthood and shaped me as a person. And I try to instill that upon my two boys. Don't try to be like anyone else. Don't try to replicate what I'm doing. Even though you may see good or bad things from what I'm doing, try to be your own person. That's how I try to translate from my upbringing and try to instill into my boys from stuff I kind of did not get from my parents, which to me, I think was a benefit.
Yeah. I find that interesting because a lot of times we say we have scars, but some of those scars are not necessarily a bad thing. So for me, like I remember getting in trouble with my pops, and I'd rather him whoop me, but he would talk to me. And the talking to did way more damage than the whooping. And I'm like, did you just whoop me, man? Like, so to this day, I still can remember that feeling of disappointment almost to my father. So now, as when the older I get and I got kids, when I get ready to whoop them, I find myself talking to them like, look, man, this is why I don't want to whoop you. You know what I'm saying? So I find myself doing those same things. I'm like, I sound just like my doggone dad, right? And you can see the disappointment because, a big thing with this podcast is, man, fathers are so important. Our kids just want to, be approved, get our approval, right? And my upbringing was the same way. I mean, I'm military brat, right? So raised in the military, moved a few times. My dad was a drill sergeant, so he was away from the home a lot, all the way up until like 6th, 7th grade. I remember those feelings of shoot, this dude is going to talk to me if I do something wrong. So I do the same things with my kids. I'm like, look, I'm going to talk to you and you're not going to like it. I really, you know, so yeah, I agree with those, and those wounds, not always a bad thing. I do remember, I did exactly what you said, Joe. I called my mom, like, I remember when you know, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, I did? I'm sorry, son. I didn't know. Like, I apologize. I didn't know it affected you. I did the same thing with my dad. I remember this to the day. He whooped me 2 licks, bro. I could not sit down for 45 minutes. I still tell my kids the same story. Like, 2 licks. It scarred me forever. So he's like, man, I'm wrong for that. You know, a grown man shouldn't hit a kid that hard. And, you know, those scars, it definitely plays a big part in how you raise your kids.
And I feel like most parents, they don't, when you're actually in that moment, you don't know that you're doing this. It's just like, even when you say stuff, even things that you say about your kids. I mean, I just give you a prime example. My son got up a couple of days ago and I was like, hey man, did you brush your teeth today? Because when he was talking to me, his breath was on, it was bad. But I'm talking to him as if it was like, man, go in there and get in there and handle that. But it hurt his feelings, you know what I mean? Because he's 9 years old. But so my wife, she gets involved. She's like, yeah, I know where you're coming from, but the way it comes out of your mouth is this, as if you're talking to one of your homeboys, to where you tell him, man, your breath stink, man, go take care of it. Your homeboy gonna be like, oh man, let me go brush my teeth. But your son ain't going to look at it that same way. He's going to be embarrassed, you know, by that. And I try not to embarrass my kids at all. Although for whatever reason, that's one thing I do often unintentionally. And a lot of times when I do it, it's not in public. It's not at schools or anything like that. I tend to do this around other family members, but it's more like, you know, my parents and my wife's parents, but they don't want that discipline with them at all. They want this to be stayed in the house, you know, kept inside the house. And I don't know that, but it's little things that I try to pick up from my kids. Like, oh, I didn't realize that actually got to you. If I said, hey, get off the phone right now. I just told you you only had 30 minutes and you went over by 35. I'm pretty big on that. If I tell you 30 minutes, I'm giving you a privilege to actually be on the game. Get off at 30 minutes. Actually, you should just be off of it at 29. But if you go over by 31, you probably gonna get it took for the next day. You know, and I try not to be hard. It's just like when I create a rule like that and it's something that I'm allowing you to do that's completely different than what you should be doing in norm, I'll give my kids a lot of leeway. You only can play the game twice a week, period. Then if something comes up to where I'm busy and I can't do anything, hey, you guys go ahead and jump on the game for another 30 minutes, but only 30 minutes because you guys deserve it. That's when I actually get real down on my kids, because now I'm allowing you another privilege that you normally can't get. So when you try to take advantage of that, that's when I take it to a totally different level. And I kind of forget that I'm this dad or this father now, because when I get mad, you know, and it's like, hold on, I thought I told you only 30 minutes. You went 50. You actually didn't even do it. Didn't even try to get off on your own. I had to come in here 20 minutes later and tell you guys to get off the game. Now you can't play it for 2 weeks. And that's where I go harder. And then my wife's like, you're going too far. You talking 2 weeks. You can say 2 or 3 days, man. Come on.
Right.
You know, I'll just throw a number out and I'll be like, I don't care. But then I'll be like, okay, you know what? I'm not as stubborn as I think, because then I'll let it go the next day.
Sure.
It's a work in progress. And to me, being a parent, being a father, man, I may set a rule, but I can tell you one thing, what I don't budge on is values, man. I do not budge on values when it comes to respect. From the fact that if you see someone to help, and like in my community, we have a lot of elderly people. So when this lady lives above us, constantly struggling to get her groceries, no elevator in the building. She's on the 4th floor. When I see her, my kids go help her. I help her myself. So I lead by example at the same point in time. So I'm like, I don't just say, hey, go ahead and help her. Even though we don't know this woman and she keeps to herself, she doesn't even speak English, but I still go help her every time. I don't go in her house. I drop her groceries off at their front door because we can't communicate together because of her language barrier. But I let her know I was raised correctly to where I'm going to respect people. I don't care what the color is. And I'm also teaching my kids the same way. So
where do you think you got that from, Joe?
I got that from my grandparents. And I can say that without a doubt. I grew up with with pretty much both sides. My grandmother on both sides, my grandfather on both sides. My grandmother's aunts who were born in the early 1900s, like 1902, they lived up until I was at least, close to 18 years old. So I was growing up and being raised by greats and great greats who lived through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, who my mom had to respect, who my actual grandma had to respect. So it's different when you're seeing levels like that. It's a whole other level of respect because you're seeing your mom and your grandmother having to respect this woman or this particular man because she's the eldest. So when you get that and you have these particular conversations with people, still to this day, I do not cuss basically in front of older people. I don't do it. It's a level of respect I've always had. Even though they cuss too, I don't do it. And I don't allow clearly my kids are 10, so I don't even allow that at all. But I often get upset with cousins who I knew were raised just like me who do it because I know that they already know better than to do that. But now that I'm older, I don't say nothing because it can cause a bunch of different stuff. But I'll be like, man, come on, we was raised better than that. Why would you do something like that? That's the biggest pet peeve that I have when it comes to respect. If I see someone, I'm going to open the door. I'm going to keep it open. I'm going to let you go through. Man or woman, black or white, I don't care. That particular thing I'm big on. So anytime my kids walk past someone and don't say, excuse me, if they cut across someone without saying, I'm passing by or excuse me, if they ignore people, if they don't say hello, those things like that, I'm big on. And when it comes to the discipline, I don't, whoop my kids, but you will definitely get things taken away from you from that. I'm lenient on everything else. But when it comes to the values that I grew up on, it's that right. There's no tolerance. There's zero tolerance with me with those.
All right. So Joe brought up a good point. So values. So those are some of the things that you obviously get instilled upon you from your parents, your grandparents, the rest of the village that helped raise you. What are some of those values from our upbringings? Because we're all in the Black community, come from very different places. So what are some of those values and characteristics that are, say, for instance, if we're mentoring Alfred to be the best father he can be for his newborn, what would be some of the values we would recommend to Alfred going forward, straight off the bat?
I would say as a new parent, as a new father, you're going to get a lot of information from a lot of people. And if you're a respectful person, you're going to take in this information, but you're still going to do what you think is best for your family. Now, when you get advice from someone, that means you don't need to tell them, I ain't doing that. You know what I mean? It's okay. I appreciate thank you for that. And you kind of keep it moving. Some stuff you're going to instill, some stuff you won't. But just my personal opinion.
I would add to that and say that being a good father is easy when you love your wife or your significant other. It's going to come natural. Don't be afraid to take your child and just do whatever with them. So you got to, I don't know if it's your wife or your significant other's first time having a baby, but if it is your wife, I don't know if it's your first baby. And if it is, right, together, then go, good. She doesn't know how to be a mom. You don't know how to be a dad. So go and don't be afraid of making mistakes. Go and try to figure out the cries for yourself. Go and, hey man, I just want to take some time. I used to take my kids and just take them. What are you doing? I'm just going to walk with them around the house and talk to them. They need to hear your voice. The values that I try to put into them is the earlier they know who you are and the closer you keep to them, the more they'll hold on to you. And it's evident, right? Your kids, well, it'll be times where she can't get them to sleep. And you're like, oh no, I got, even when you're tired, I got them, right? When you get home from work, babe, give me 20 minutes and I got you. And I'm going to give you an hour and I got the babe. I'm going to just do it. Nope, go do. I got it. You know what I mean? Like just step in. And a lot of times as men, we're afraid to do that just because we don't know, but truthfully, she don't know either. I don't care how many of her aunts, how many nieces and nephews she didn't, her girlfriend's kids she didn't done. When you got your own, it's completely different. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, man. Making mistakes are fun. When you do, correct them immediately, you'll be good to go. So
yeah. I would say, I'm not sure what your relationship was, Alfred, with your father before he passed, but understanding that a relationship between a son and his father can be as strong as anything if you make it. So my recommendation, bond, do those little small things, listen, have that communication down, be present. You know, present is 90%, right? So you got to be present. You got to be there. Listen and try to communicate as often as physically possible. I think just by doing those things, and then you're a smart guy, you'll figure everything else out. All those other recommendations that Mike and Joe said, I think you'll be a natural and shoo-in for all that. But when it comes to you and your son and instilling values, you have to have communication, and communication goes both ways. So you're gonna have the communication there for them to listen to you, for you to listen to them, and build that bond. It can be a beautiful thing. It can be the strongest thing in the world, the relationship between a son and his father. But you have to be around, you have to be present to make that try effort to instill upon your son whatever you're trying to instill upon him. So
thank you. Appreciate that advice, brothers.
We talked about a lot of different things, guys. Out of all this stuff that we just talked about in our upbringings, our childhood, what would you say is the most important thing that is prominent today, as far as rules? In the Black community, there's always those set rules that you have that guide Black children within the Black community. And they're all kind of like templated rules that we grew up on. And I'll say a stereotypical one. So this may not fit you. You may not have had this in your household, a rule. You had to be in the house before the street lights came on. So you can go out and play all day. We didn't have the video game addiction like the kids do now when we were growing up. So we did a lot of outside activities. One of the rules that I know was for a lot of my cousins and myself and everything was, hey, you have to be in before the street lights came on. You can do whatever you want. They had a lot more freedom, but you had to be on before the street lights came on. That was one of our set rules. What other set rules were from your childhood that you see yourself replicating in your children's upbringing?
You know, I would say real quick, just one of many that I can think of, but for sure, this one is to where I know I'm doing it a lot, is making sure that my kids don't interrupt me, my wife, or anyone that's an adult while they're talking, whether it's on the phone or in person. I'm pretty a real big stickler when you interrupt me, but I also explain this to my kids. When I was growing up, my mom would just say, what the hell you doing interrupting me while I'm talking on the phone? Or don't you see I'm on the phone? It's more like a quick boom. Like, didn't I just tell you not to talk to me while I'm on the phone? That kind of thing. I don't do that, but I try to make sure I explain why this is rude and why you should not do that. However, if it is important, you need to tap me and you say, I know, please, but it's important. It's the first thing you need to come out your mouth. This is important. I'm sorry. Then I'll tell this person who I'm on the phone with or talking to, give me a second, hold on, let me actually, because I don't want to feel like you're being ignored. And this is some of the things I wish that I was actually taught back then. It's like, I try to take what I remember when I was a kid. What if my mom or dad would have did it this way? And that's how I bring it in, into my parenting. I'll be okay with if my mom said, don't interrupt me, but here's why, because this is an important conversation and it meant this to me, A, B, and C. And if it can't wait 10 minutes until I'm off the phone, then, boom, she could have just explained that. But most parents, whether they're Black or white, don't make a difference. They feel like they don't need to explain anything to kids. And I'm the polar opposite of that. I feel like I need to explain things to my kids so that they understand it, so that they won't do it going forward. That's the way I look at things. So if I say it and they interrupt me, son, don't interrupt me right now. Give me 5 minutes. I'll talk to you in a second. Once I'm done with the conversation, I would go in and say, look, here's why I said what I said. Here's why it's important not to interrupt me. And here's why I don't want you to do this going forward. After that, we're clear. We're good to go. Now what's up? So then I look back. I'm like, damn, only if my mom or dad would have done something like that. I just added to my daily parenting thing. This is what I'm going to start doing. And it's a constant check off, to where like, you know what? My mom did it this way. I don't want to do it this way, but you're going to do it that way, but you're going to add your own twist to it. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I had the same thing. Hey, you don't talk when grown folks are talking. What we do, uh, here in our house, so if our boys have something to say, they have to say, excuse me. And then they have to wait to be acknowledged. If it is an emergency, they can blurt out, "Is it an emergency? I need A, B, or C." And then that allows me to know, hey, well, I need to stop what I'm doing to address this. Hold on, whoever I'm talking to, I got an emergency over here with one of my boys. Whatever you fill in the blank, whatever the emergency is. But yeah, so they tap me or they say, "Excuse me," so that they're not interrupting anybody. It doesn't have to be another adult. Just if I'm talking to another kid or whatever it is, to have the manners to say, "Hey, excuse me, I'm just not going to blurt in and inject into your conversation, but I have something of value or importance to add." So absolutely. Anything else?
Yes. I would say that for me, what happens in this house stays in this house. That was a big rule. And so we implement that as well, but not to the extent where if somebody's hurting you, then you can't talk. If somebody tells you something or you're doing something wrong or, and you can't tell your parents to tell somebody, find somebody that you can tell you're being hurt or something like that. But we definitely, just because of the unique position that we're in, being leaders in the community, we explain to our kids that, hey, you're going to hear a lot of things. You're going to see a lot of things that most kids wouldn't get to see. You might be privy to some conversations. If you hear me and mommy having a conversation or whatever, it's not for you to go out and blurt out everything that you hear and talk about. So trying to instill that into kids is tough when you got a 4-year-old who repeats literally everything you say. So, but your 8-9-year-old that you can start talking to them about those things. So what happens in the house stays in this house. And it just shows your loyalty to your family, and how important that is. I can remember, I grew up when my parents were pastors. So a lot of people came through our house. A lot of, conversations that I was privy to that I just couldn't repeat. My parents are doing counseling for these people who are really needing some help, and not necessarily just spiritual guidance, but just help in life. It's not for me to get out there and say, "Hey, I heard, did you know so and so did this," or they're struggling with, alcohol or sex or whatever. So growing up in that environment where a lot of what I heard, I couldn't repeat. I make sure that you shouldn't be repeating everything you hear. It's not for the world to consume every single word that your parents tell you, that you hear, in conversations. So definitely a rule that we implement here in our home.
I know another rule that I live by to today. I remember elementary school, I was on the flag football team. Something happened. I can't remember what grade I was in, maybe 5th grade. I got upset and I quit the team. Walked home. I got home. My mom was like, "What are you doing? Shouldn't you be at flag football practice?" I said, "No, I quit." She said, "What?" I said, "I quit." She dragged my butt back to that field. She told me, you don't ever quit anything. You finish what you start. So if you had the audacity to start something, you see it out, you finish it. Don't start something if you don't have the intentions of finishing it. So ever since then, anything that I quit, I went back and I finished it. I only quit maybe 2 other things ever in my life. Then I went back and I finished it. So it's one of those things that was instilled upon me, from my mom, that she was adamant. She was like, hey, I don't raise any quitters. If you're going to start something, think about it long and hard before you start it, because as soon as you start it, you're going to finish this. You know what I mean? So that's definitely one of the things that I took from my upbringing. That was a rule in the house. Don't start something unless you plan on finishing it. I know another one. Has anybody had this? Do as I say, not as I do.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, yeah.
I hate that rule.
That was a huge thing. Do as I say, not as I do. All right. So.
And it still goes into the same thing to where it's like, I get it. I'm going to do as you say and not as you do, but can you explain what that means? That's, as I was as a kid, I would always want to be like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Just when you would do something, I would get it. But when it came to like certain rules, like being respectful and kind to people and those, I got it. So I never questioned that. But when it was like, okay, don't interrupt me. Okay. Why? If I needed something, but I never was told, well, just wait till I get off the phone, that kind of thing, or do as I say. Okay. I'm going to do as you say, but what do you mean by that? You know what I mean? Like I was a kind of kid who was like, you needed to explain things to me. I needed to get it. I needed to get that aha, and then I'm good. You know what I mean? But if you had to pop me and, you know, whoop my butt and stuff like that, that didn't make me get it. It just made me stay away from you. You know, I didn't be like, oh, I got it now because I just got a whooping. It was just like, you know what? I ain't even going that route anymore. I'm not going to ever even mention anything. And it actually took me away from them, not closer. Because if I was getting, let's say, disciplined for something I knew was wrong, I got it. You know what I mean? You deserved it. I deserved it. So you deserve to do that to me. But if I was getting disciplined, hit, smacked, whatever you want to call it back then, whooped, and I didn't really know why, that actually scarred me.
Well, I think the expectations have changed. We're talking about the environment. So the expectations of what a parent's supposed to be, like you said earlier, your parent's supposed to be going out there and playing with their children, teaching their children more hands-on than previous generations. Because the expectation now for adults and parents is that you have to communicate. You have to verbally communicate with your children a lot more than what was expected of our parents' generation. Our parents' generation, all you got to do is feed them, put clothes on the back, right?
Right.
Put a shelter over their head, and then there you go. You're a good parent. Now it's expected that you go the extra length, that you're a teacher, you're a role model, especially today, man. You're more of a catch-all everything than what our parents were, or at least the expectation for our parents to be. Understanding that, where does it stop? Where are the limits for us? Because it's going to keep on transforming, so that by the time our kids are parents, who knows what the expectation will be for them and for them to be a parent. For right now, what is the expectation of a father based on our fathers and what was expected of them? So, what is expected of us?
Man, I'll tell you this, like my dad even told me, he told me and my little brother, 'cause I'm the oldest. He's like, y'all changed more diapers in a year than I changed the entire time with all three of his kids. Right. So it's just different now, mostly because every home is a 2-income home. So women aren't really staying at home. So we have to pull our weight as well. And a lot of times, my dad was there, but he didn't talk to me until I was in high school, pretty much. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't have that. He didn't really talk to me like, hey, son, let me teach you some stuff and let me, roll with you. I mean, I'll say middle school, late middle school, right? That's when he really started talking to me and showing me how to do things. And as I sit back and think about it now, that's what's missing. Our fathers don't have men around showing them how to go from 60 to 80. Right. You know what I mean? Like, they're showing us how to get from, where we are now to where they are. But that's what's missing, right? That big generational gap. So what's expected of us as fathers is, if I talk to my kids, if I can owe child support and I pay child support, I'm a great father, right? If I'm in the house and I provide, and all I really got to do is, and you'll see, I even see it with the mom, with our moms. My son does a lot more than my husband did. His father did. You should be happy you got him. You know what I'm saying? But the women, our women are like, no, man, I work too. You need to change some diapers. You need to feed your kids. You need to wake up too in the middle of the night. So, some of that stuff is expected. And I think that it's important for us to do. It helps build those relationships with our kids. It also for me, it strengthened me as a father. It helped me understand who they are. I didn't have to ask so many questions like, do I need to feed my kids next? Or what do they like to eat? I know you're out all day on a spa day. I gave you that spa day, but I don't even know how, what time do the kids eat? That's terrible. For me, it's terrible for me to have to ask something so simple and, not knowing my kids like. So, yeah, that's what I think.
I'll ask the question. The stereotype of Black fathers being missing in action is the standard, specifically for the African American community, the Black community. It's a standard lower for Black fathers and the expectation of Black fathers. Can Black fathers just roll in, keep the lights on, keep the food in the house, and be the greatest thing since sliced bread? Are Black fathers now held to the same standard?
Ooh,
it's tough.
That's a tough one, man. I'll be honest with you. Being held to the same standards is going to be I don't think that's the case. It's actually, you actually get a lot of looks when, let's just say, when I take my kids out by myself without my wife, I think more people look at me in an aha or wow type of moment when I walk into malls or anything like that with just my kids, because they're not used to seeing it than anything. And I noticed this once coming from Texas, and me and my 4 kids were in Austin. We jumped back on the plane by ourselves, just me and my 4 kids. I got so many people, predominantly not black people, talking to me like, oh my God, I cannot believe that you are getting on the plane with a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8 and a 9-year-old by yourself and the moms out here. And in my mind, I was like, these are my kids, man. Like, why are you asking me this old weird question like that? But I'm trying to be respectful and stuff. But it just made me think like, damn, you don't see it so much that when they do see it, they don't even know how to act. People were coming up to me. I had on army fatigue pants. That's it. Just the pants. I was in the military, according to everybody. Coming up to me, oh my God, thank you for your service, everything that you do for us. And I'm like, I ain't in the military. What are you talking about? But because they thought because of this and I was with my kids that I was military, I was basically raised by a military family. So they just thought, well, shoot, he's doing that because he was taught right. He was, taught by the military. And I went with it. I was just like, thank you, but in my mind, I was like, come on, bro. Like, it's more to it. There are, black men out there who take care of their families in every aspect. You know what I mean? Like, what's wrong with me jumping on an airplane with my kids to come back? You're going to be able to handle them? Yes, I actually can. I know how to actually parent. I know how to parent. I've read books on parenting. I've talked to parents. I've actually taken courses on it. I didn't just say, I'm going to just jump in and be like, dude, no. I talk to my kids on a daily basis. I'm always here. I took them in every night. It's a bunch of stuff that never happened to me, but I said it's not going to happen to them. So that's what I do. But to answer that question, we need more of it. We need more of what we're doing. And then as people start to see it more, then it will become like this normal. Right now, it ain't nowhere near the normal, if you ask me.
What do you think, Alfred?
Yeah, and I think the reason it's not the normal in society is because black men as fathers has been painted with a negative image for so long that when they seen Joe, out there, it was just like, oh, wow, and I think that stereotype or that image of a black father is still perpetuated in today's society, that they always continue to see or hear about the negative side of black fathers. All the fathers that's, are positive and doing what they need to do, that light is not being shined on them because they're being overshadowed by all these negative images. And that's what's being, populated in society and on the internet and on social media, that, when that opportunity comes where they interact with someone that's doing what they're supposed to do and stepping up, that it's like, oh, wow. It's an unseen thing to them, like man, unicorn. It does happen. Right. And until they start seeing, like Joe said, until they start seeing it on a constant basis, then it will start to, overshadow some of the negative stereotypes that they have, black fathers.
But you have to be honest. So growing up, we all knew brothers and sisters in the black community that grew up with one parent households. Usually the mother, because the father wasn't around, the black father wasn't around. So how do you think that impacts all of us that grew up with a father in our lives? But how do you think that impacts Mike, a black father now raising their kids if their father wasn't even around? How does that impact a fellow brother in the brothers of fatherhood that has to raise kids where he doesn't have an example, a prime example from his childhood of what right looks like?
Sure. So I know a lot of black men that are fathers now that didn't have their fathers. One of my boys actually has 7 kids, and he's an amazing father. Right? So I commend him on like 7. God dang, what? Yeah, he tripping. But for him, he's an amazing father, right? And I think what it did for him, he said, I'm going to do what I didn't have. It's one or two things that are going to happen for every last one of us. We're going to say, man, I don't know. I don't have an example. So I'm going to blame it on my example. Not having one, I don't have a model home to mimic my life over. Or I'm going to say, you know what? I didn't have that, but I'm going to find someone that models that. And until I find someone, I'm going to do exactly what I would want my father to do for me. And to be there, to show up. That's, I just say hi, take care of me, love me, acknowledge who I am. And I think that you get those two things, I really haven't found anything between either. Hey, I didn't have my father, so I don't really know how to be a father. I don't really care. And a lot of that I think stems from hurt. Or you get the father that says, hey, man, I didn't have my dad, but I'm going to be exactly what the opposite is and do the best I can until I know better. So the saying is, when we know better, we do better. So hopefully, as a community, we can continue to try to grow and do that and empower men to do it. And a lot of it too is being scared. We didn't grow up. What do boys grow up with? Power toys, sports equipment, tools, and girls grow up with doll houses, dolls, playing in their weddings since they was 5. And they're, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're changing diapers as soon as they sisters or cousins or friends have a baby, they over there taking care of it. We don't do none of that. I don't even like touching nobody else's baby until they're 3 months old. Right. So we don't grow up doing those things. So now it's tough for me when I don't even know what to do as a father. Like, what do you mean I got to change a diaper? Well, how do I hold them? You get the women, don't hold them like that. I'm quick to tell women, hey, I'm not going to drop my own child. You know what I'm saying? Right. So, we just have to step up as men and say, you know what? I don't really care how I grew up. I'm going to do the best that I know how to do and not use my past as an excuse.
Well, growing up, I never had those scenarios where I encountered having to even think about being a father. So it was the farthest thing from my mind. So when me and the wife, when we started planning for our first child, for our first son, I didn't even think of, and I'm ashamed to say, I didn't even think about going to my dad at that point in time and asking him for pointers, because it wasn't, we didn't have that type of relationship. I'm almost ashamed to say. So didn't even go to my own father and say, hey, what are the pointers about being a father? But yeah, so women go to their mothers. So daughters go to their mothers. You think sons would go to their fathers for nuggets of wisdom or information how to be a father. But I know, at least from me, my sample, I didn't. I didn't have a kumbaya with my moment with my father to talk about fatherhood. Very, down the road, maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 years down the road from when our first child was born, me and him talked about being parents. We had a parenting conversation, but it was mostly about things that my brother was doing wrong, as opposed to certain things that we should be doing and instilling upon our children. You know what I mean? So where do we find good examples? And if we don't have the good example from our childhood, who do we go for advice as Black men?
I mean, you need to come to things like this, right? I mean, here's the way I look at it. Let's just say you watch reality TV. If you think that that's real Black families and that's how we really do things in real life, you got a whole nother thing coming. It's one of the reasons why I don't even watch TV like I used to. When we would watch TV growing up, let's say the Huxtables.
I was about to say.
Totally different TV show than any reality TV show that we're currently seeing. Even Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in the 90s. Those are Living Single, all those particular type of shows that we grew up on, Martin, all those. Those are, but the family ones, just taking away Martin, but those were shows that you can actually take and learn something from. So you're not going to see anything on TV, on actual mainstream TV, that anything you can pick up on, unless it's talking about some type of single parent household, because that's what the media is portraying us to be, when it's completely not that way. And being that when you get a group of Black fathers coming around, it's too positive for mainstream TV. There's so many different groups out there that are connecting on parenting, on Black fathers and stuff like that, but they'll never be recognized in mainstream, like on social media, on a larger platform, because it's too positive. There's not anything negative behind it. This is like, just like Mike was saying, man, my dad he didn't live with us. But see, I also grew up with a stepfather who I didn't even get along with because of the things that I didn't like and the way he treated me. So I got a man in my house trying to raise me, but I don't even like him. But then I got my dad, who is my dad, but he doesn't live with me. So all I did, man, is just took all that information, soaked it up, and I just said, this is what I'm not going to be when I grow up. Everything that I wanted to do as a kid, I just said, all right, I'll do it later on. And then now every time that people see me, like, your kids are so spoiled, they're great. My kids aren't spoiled at all. My kids are living my childhood dreams, if that makes sense. They're actually living my childhood dreams. Why? Because all of these things that I'm doing, I wanted to do, and I held that in for decades until I actually was able to actually become financial secure and stable enough to do it. So I never went to Hawaii to take a family vacation. We never went on vacation. We went to Sacramento to see a family member for vacation. Yeah. That's not necessarily vacation. So what do I tell myself? When I get money and I get a family, I'm going to go to Hawaii. I don't give a damn how much it costs. I'm going to save up and I'm going to go. So what do I do? Because I love going to Hawaii or a beach town or a vacation. So when they look at it, they're like, oh, man, your kids are spoiled, man. They have no idea. My kids aren't spoiled at all. They're living they're living my childhood dream. And I say that, and it kind of like startles people like, what? What are you talking about? But you can take information, man, and just store it away and then actually do something positive with it. Problem is, though, most people aren't going to actually understand that. So it'll never be in the media to where you can get it. So we have to do things like this to kind of just get that out little by little.
So you're talking about doing platforms like this to get it out to the culture that, hey, there are Black fathers of color out there that are not the stereotypical what you see on TV, doing the shenanigans, that they are, just like any other father of any other race trying to do the right thing by their kids. That was a question that always lingered in my mind. Who do we turn to for advice about being a father, particularly a Black father, especially in today's day and age? What do you got, Mike?
Yeah, so for me, it's looking for other people that live the example that I want to live, right? So whether that's at work with a coworker, whether it's, in a community fashion, whether you go to church, whether you go to, a lodge meeting or whatever you do for fun to connect with other men. It's about finding the one or two guys that's actually living a life, in the way that you want them to, just through coworkers. It's just through, like us, just finding other Black people or other Black fathers is like, hey man, I wonder how they're living, and, getting to know them. Like, hey bro, you got kids, man. And, having a conversation, not being afraid to say, hey man, I'm looking for some dudes that can, that's looking to grow just like I am. And we're in an age of technology. We have all of these things at our disposal, but yet we don't use them to our advantage to find out information. What's the old saying? If you want to hide something from a Black person, put it in a book. Right? Joe said I read books on parenting. I did too. So I read the entire thing. Somebody gave me the book, and my wife was like, "You read that?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to figure out how to do this. Even if I don't use everything, it gives me a reference point and know where to start." So just information is everywhere. Even if you don't like to read, get an Audible. So many different resources, so many different tools. You may not be religious, but you can take some aspects of different religions and learn how to, how can I better myself? Because a better human is going to produce better children. It's going to help you be better as a person. So if I'm struggling, dealing with some emotional hurt, if I bring a child into that emotional hurt, I'm not going to do nothing but scar them. So if I don't want to better myself, if I'm not looking to grow as a person, then it doesn't matter whoever else I fall into. The person that I need to talk to could be right in front of me, but I'm too hurt to even open my mouth because the last person hurt me, or, the last relationship didn't work out, or, dudes is grimy. He might be trying to get my girl. You know how we look at stuff these days. So just being okay with with getting out there, being vulnerable, and choosing very wisely about who you talk to.
So this question going over to Alfred. Who did you turn to, if you turned to anybody yet, once you found out you're going to be a father, for advice and to give you any type of words of wisdom going forward as you try to figure it out and be the best father that you can possibly be? I understand you probably read some books, parenting books about newborns, how to take care of them, but what about the actual basic words of wisdom or guidance that you sought out from a Black father to get information from?
For me, and not to say like I went to them and said, hey, I need advice on A, B, and C. I think it just came in just, conversations in general over the years with particular individuals that I might have looked up to, or that I felt that they'd done an excellent job in raising their kids, and just having those conversations along with, like you said, reading numerous books or articles on, being a father. And I think just seeing how different people in my life that I aspire to be, looking at them and seeing them as an example, it's like, you know what, I want to do that when I become a father. And so having those examples, I think that's some of the things that I've taken to shape how I want to become a father. So taking those examples from those particular men in my life that, I have looked up to, or friends who I thought that done an excellent job in raising their kids, just taking those examples and saying to myself, okay, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what I'm not going to do, based on having conversations and them, letting me know that, hey, this didn't work when I tried this on my kids. And so that's a mental note to myself, okay, that didn't work for him. I'm not saying that's going to work or not work in my situation, because it might, because every child is different. But just having those examples, just having conversations with, whether it was friends or people I looked up to, or even colleagues at work, having those conversations about family, about raising kids.
Yeah, so Alfred made some great points. Every child is different. So Joe knows, Mike knows, my two boys could be even more different. So what tools I use to try to get a point across and instill things on one child, it may not work for the other child. So you have to know your children. You have to adapt. You have to learn on the fly, and you have to try different things. It's really about really throwing the stuff up against the wall, seeing what sticks. Taking your tools from your past, your childhood, taking recommendations of certain things that you see from colleagues, friends, coworkers that you think you can properly try to use, try to instill those same values in your own children. It's a whole bunch of hodgepodge trying to figure it out. What I want to do.
Let me say this one thing.
Go ahead.
Me too at the mic.
All right, one thing. So I'm a little different. I have a great father. Mm-hmm. I remember my wife was 8 months pregnant. I was at work in Hawaii. We used to work in a building that was underground, like a quarter-mile walkout. I remember running out to the vehicle and breaking down in tears and like, dude, I cannot be a father. There's no way I'm ready. Call my dad's like, yo, there's no way I can live up to this. Like, he's like, live up to what? My dad was such a good father, in my opinion, that I never thought I could surpass, live up to the standard that he set for fatherhood. So it was intimidating altogether, and just being able to have that conversation with him was like, son, you're good. I promise you. Don't worry. So there's some people out there that have those fathers, and shoot, right? I mean, just living up to the standard that he set as a father, but to me, it was rough. Like, man, there's no way I can do it. And then it coming to fruition is awesome. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Nice.
And I would say real quick, when we grew up, me, you, Paulo, Side, we actually turned to coaches. Now that I'm starting to think about it, at least I did. Like a lot of my coaches were like father figures, and I would take one in particular being Roy Stingley. He raised 5 kids, not on his own, but they were still father figures to all of us, at least while they were coaching us, when we were teenagers. They didn't treat any of us different at all, even though they weren't our dads. But we still have relationships with them till this day.
So I would even throw Turner into the mix. I know Turner treated me like another adopted son. He always cut our hair while we're sitting in his little garage barbershop. He was there dropping nuggets of wisdom and asking us about certain things, trying to mentor us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll get them from some of your friends' dads, and sometimes you get them from coaches. That's where I turned to while you were growing up. Now you still have those coaches, but there's other platforms to look for it, and that's why I'm super, grateful for this particular podcast.
I think the moral of the story is that growing up, there's so many things that influence and shape you to be the man that you are today. Whether it's good, bad, wrong, or indifferent, you take a lesson, which each wound teaches you something. Hopefully it teaches you something. How I want to close out today's podcast is that I want everybody to think about two things, whether it's bad or good, that you took from your childhood that shape your parenting style, or for Alfred, what you believe you're going to instill upon your child from your childhood. Two major things that you know for certain that were such a pivotal moment in your childhood that you vowed never to do this, or that this thing was so great that I will instill this upon my children. What two things come into your mind that you will pass on to your offspring because you feel that those values or those characteristics are so important to have in today's day and age? So my two things are the thing that my mom instilled. I told you never quit anything. If you start it, you're going to finish it. So I instill it upon my boys even to today. Hey, don't start them if you don't plan on finishing it. It's one of my major pet peeves. If you're going to start something ever in life, you better finish it. Think long and hard before you start something, but if you're going to start it, by all means, finish it. Don't quit. That's number one. Number two is education. My mom said, the proverbial the man can take anything away from you at a moment's notice. Your riches, your material things, they can take it away from you in a moment's notice. You can have the best house on the block, the nicest car on the block, the best clothes on the block, and all of it can be stripped away from you at a moment's notice. The only thing that some man cannot take away from you is your knowledge. And that's the reason why she stressed education, not only the institutional education like going to college, but just picking up a book and read. All right. So she pounded education, and knowledge. And that's the only thing that the proverbial man can't take away from you is your knowledge. So if you had that knowledge in order to accumulate all those material things, that house, those cars, and everything else, if they take it all away from you, you still have that knowledge in order to gain it all back. So two things, don't ever quit. If you start something, finish it, and knowledge is power. Always strive to gain as much knowledge as you possibly can.
And I would say my two will be never stop learning, which is still on the guidelines of education. And then always be respectful, which can be, being honest, open, that kind of thing. But being respectful and never stop learning. I think those are my two most important things that I'm actually passing down to my kids.
I would say punishment fitting the crime as a parent, making sure that I don't overdo it. I felt like a couple times my parents overdid it, just being the oldest and not really understanding how to go about it. And then the last one is respect for authority. To me, that's so big. That's what you got missing with the kids these days. A lot of times us as parents, the parents our age are trying to be our kids' friends. We had kids early out of high school, and now I just want to be, I'm my 18-year-old's best friend. We're going to go to the club together and hang out. Nah, man, respect for authority. I don't think that the shootings in the streets are by any means, justified. But when a cop told us to get out the street, I'm going to get out the street. Right. Just because not necessarily the man, but the authority that stands behind it. So just little things like that is what I would say. Punishment fitting the crime and respect and authority.
I think the two for me, have already been mentioned, but I think the number one for me would be respect. Not only respect for authority, but respect for elders, because that's real big for me. That's something that I still practice to this day. And then the other one would be, like Joe mentioned, to never stop learning, because education is something, that can never be taken away from you, like you said, Apollo. And those are my two biggest things, and not just education in the sense of, getting degrees, but also just constantly learning, to build yourself up and to better yourself. And that, like I said, not necessarily in a college setting, but, go and read a book, go and learn something, to educate yourself and to build your mind, to edify your life. So those are my two biggest things: respect and to constantly learn.
Today's inspirational dad quote comes from an article written by Dr. Robert Tabi. 4 key ways your childhood shapes you. While your childhood is a part of you, it doesn't have to dictate who you become. The passage reads, "Our childhoods are a part of us. While we can't change the past, we can choose to look at it through a different lens. We can move forward in the present despite our childhood wounds, and in the process heal them. Step back, look at what you have walked out with, see what you have learned, decide what to keep and what to ignore." That ends today's show. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Brothers in Fatherhood. Follow us on Instagram, Brothers, the letter N, Fatherhood, and on Twitter, Bros in Fatherhood. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Brothers in Fatherhood. Thanks for listening to the Brothers in Fatherhood podcast. Before we go, show some love for your new favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Then stay tuned for next week, where we discuss what age is appropriate to have the conversation about sex. We'd love to hear from you. If you have a subject you have been dealing with and you want us to address, or simply want to make a comment and let your voice be heard, please send any and all questions or comments to the Brotherhood at brothers, the letter N, fatherhood @gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Stay safe.